because I think that of all the classes that we're going to have in the Bar Mitzvah series, I think that the one that you're most likely to assume has the least connection to the Bar Mitzvah idea, but in fact has a tremendous connection, is history. In simple words, I think it's an overlooked subject, and I think perhaps the reason why it's overlooked is because people don't know why we're learning it. What's the significance of delving into matters of the past? In fact, matters that are oftentimes, if you look at the last date in the Torah is more than 3,300 years. Well, not quite, but about exactly 3,300 years ago. That's a long time, and it seems dated. But I think that as a way of introduction, I think it's a very, very important. It's exceedingly important to learn and delve into Jewish history, because there's very clear patterns that are established. And if we fail to take the lessons of the failings of history, then we are almost guaranteed to repeat them. Almost guaranteed. And it's true. You could, if you give me any century or any time period in Jewish history, and you'll see that it's part of the pattern, part of the global pattern. Now, last year when I did this class, I made a mistake, and I tried to just give all the information in an hour and a half, and it's not possible.
No. I remember that you raced.
I raced through and then someone asked a question, and I said, "Why are you asking a question?"
We can't have no time for questions.
So what I'm going to try to do now, I'm going to try to give more perspective, more insight, more lessons that are more macro ideas and less into the micro, but we'll also try to get a little bit done. And I have a feeling that we're not going to cover everything today, and we'll have to do a part 2, which is fine, because I think it's going to be my plan is to make it interesting. So
I'd love to have another class during the week of this, so that we really
You know what?
get
This is every class, every segment of this course is important, but to me, this is probably the most important of all.
well,
Because
yeah.
we just
Get
don't get
finished
this.
last week.
Well, and understanding the chronology of this is not
very
easy.
important.
There's a lot to it.
And this year as well, if you take a look at your pamphlet, you'll notice that it's not just 2 pages. It's actually, well, last year we had only 1 page. But the first 2 pages are basically giving you like a timeline throughout Jewish history. It kind of walks you through the major events. And on page number 3, you'll see a little bit of a picture of the history of Torah, so to speak, and how the Torah was developed, or more precisely, how it was codified. Means the various stages in the history of how the Torah came to be, in its current form. And the last part, if you've gone to enough of my brother's classes, you'll notice that you'll have seen this before. The last part actually is tracing the leaders or the Torah transmission, the history of the Torah, and the individuals that are responsible for transmitting it from 3,300 years ago to today.
Right, we did that. We had a class on that one.
Yes. So this is, and what you'll find in Jewish history, a lot is it's very much the history of individuals, much more than forces. Because in Jewish life, it's all about the great individual. It's all about taking a person and perfecting them. We know that through our Musar study, but we also know that's really the focus. The focus is the great people. And because they're oftentimes the microcosm of everyone else, they're the Jew in his or her finest iteration. Okay, so that's the introductions, and we start with the statement in the Talmud. The Talmud breaks down Jewish history to 3 eras. The Talmud says, perhaps you've heard it. Perhaps you heard something similar. You don't know exactly where it's placed and what the full Talmudic statement is. But the Talmud says as follows: Shis alfen shana have alma. Which language is that in? Who knows? Shis alfen shana have alma.
Yiddish.
Not in Yiddish, no. It's not in
Is it
Hebrew.
Aramaic
It's
or
in
something?
I
Aramaic.
was gonna say Farsi, that's not the
Yeah.
Aramaic has a word like shis.
Shis, yeah. Shis means six, like shesh, very similar to the Hebrew.
Yeah.
6,000 years, Hava Alma, the world, like Olam is the word, Alma is the word in Aramaic. The world's going to be around for 6,000 years.
Oh,
So let's
Yes.
say, do we really have to believe that?
yeah, 'cause we
Well,
only
it's
have
a perspective of
35
Jewish
years
history.
Okay,
We only
that's
have
good.
30.
No, and remember, when it's talking about Alma, it's talking about from Adam. It's not talking about anything before Adam.
Sure.
So it's not. We're not necessarily saying that the entire world. I mean, the world of Adam, from Adam.
That makes sense.
It means from when the Torah starts. We're not talking what happened.
And
You
we're
know,
in what year right now?
Good.
no. This is a moot argument. It's not. We're not arguing as to whether or not the world is 13.8 billion years old. That's irrelevant to our discussion because that's all before Adam. Since Adam, we have documented about 5,000 and change years, and that's the world that we're talking about.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that after the 6,000 is over, the world ceases to exist. It means this world that we're talking about is a 6,000-year project. The first 2,000 years is Tohu. Tohu means chaos. The next 2,000 words is Torah. And the final 2,000 years is Mashiach.
What's the second two? I didn't know.
Tohu, which means chaos. Torah, which means Torah. Mashiach means Mashiach. The idea being is that this world is going to have three phases. There's going to be the first phase of chaos. Chaos means a lack of clarity. A lack of clarity in what? In the goal of the world. What's the goal of the world? Right? What's the essence, the reality of the world? God. Right? We know that if you look at your timeline, and you look at the first thing on the timeline, we have Abraham is born. What year was Abraham born into the 60,000 year cycle? 1948. Which is an easy number to remember because it's the same year in the Gregorian calendar that we have the State of Israel. So Abraham is all the way at the end of this 2,000 year cycle, and he's the one who brought the transition from Tohu to Torah, from chaos, from lack of knowledge into the idea of God. He grew up in a pagan world, we know that. Abraham was the one. Abraham is significant in Jewish history because he's the one who, by deduction of his intellectual capabilities, deduced and reasoned that God must exist. And God, how the Jewish people define God. Hence, he was the one who ended this era of chaos, and he ushered in the idea of Torah. Once you know the idea of God, the next thing is, well, what does God expect of us? That's the Torah. And if you fast forward to the fourth year, the point of the 4,000, which is about 2,000 years ago, you have Rabbi Judah the Prince, who writes down the Mishnah. Writing down the Mishnah was the final phase of writing down. Well, Mishnah and the Talmud was the final phase of writing down the Torah, of codifying, of organizing all of the Torah.
Would that be the fifth book of the Bible?
No. That's just the written Torah. That's just one aspect.
Okay.
The written Torah is to Torah what this document is to our discussion. It's a blueprint. It's a baseboard, right? You know, it's a reference point. But the actual Torah is much more than that. The Torah means everything that God demands of us, expects of us, wants to teach us about life. You know.
So you said, Rabbi, that Rabbi Judah the Prince then, and writing the Mishnah came at the end of the Torah phase?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Means it's the sealing of the Torah, so to speak, the sealing of the Talmud, and then now bringing the world, ushering in Mashiach. Now, what does Mashiach mean? Right? What does Messiah mean? Messiah is an idea that's very, very ubiquitous in Jewish life, in Jewish thinking, in Jewish liturgy. Right? You look at the Jewish prayers. How many times do we reference Mashiach? Rebuilding of Jerusalem, rebuilding the temple, right? Reinstituting the grandeur and the splendor of yesteryear. Right? How many times are you talking? All the time. Well, what does Mashiach mean? And what is this culmination? So I think it's important to bring in this other point, which I also think is going to be a window into, once again, macro picture of Jewish history. we're told in the Talmud, Mashiach is going to come in a time that is either entirely righteous or entirely wicked. Mashiach is going to come in a generation that's either entirely righteous or entirely wicked. Now-
I thought it was you had to have so many years of peace before he would show up.
Well, we're just using what it actually says in the Talmud.
Okay.
Talmud doesn't say a lot, but what it does say is that Messiah is coming in a time of total righteousness or total wickedness. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is it coming because we earn it, because we're totally righteous, or is it coming because we don't earn it, we're totally wicked? What does that mean? What's Messiah? Right? Is it a culmination of righteousness or wickedness? It seems like it's both, or one or the other. So I think this brings us to maybe the definition of what the Jewish people are. We're told in Abraham, in the books of Genesis, right before the Jews get the Torah, we're told what the Jewish people are. We're told the Jewish people are a distinct nation. Distinct. We're different. We're different. Now, you could be different and distinct in one of two ways. You could either be notorious, you could be wicked, but also like distinct in your wickedness. That's one way to do it. Or you could be distinct in your righteousness, in your piety. Right? The culmination of this 6,000-year project is going to be because of the Jews. Jews doing what? Jews doing what the Jews are by definition are, a nation of holy people. Holy means distinct. It means different. Now, the Jews are bound to be holy because that's what the Torah says you're going to have to remain holy. Right? We just had recently in the book of Numbers, 2 weeks ago, we read in the Parsha about Bilam. And Bilam is given not a blessing to the Jewish people, and he defines the Jewish people as being a loner nation, right? Loner, not as in a loner car, but loner with an O and no A, right? We're alone.
Right.
We're a distinct nation. That is the definition of what it means to be Jewish. And the fact that we're going to remain distinct, and we're bound to stay like that, right? That is the reason why, when Jewish people veer away from being distinct in the good sense, right? They are not morally upstanding. They're not a light to the nations. They're not the moral guardians of the world. What happens? We see that they have anti-Semitism, right? If you map out Jewish history, you'll notice that the ups, when the Jewish people are that's the best of times. Jewish people are distinct because of their holiness, right? There's no anti-Semitism. When they dip down and they remain down for a significant amount of time, right? They are at risk of assimilating. They are at risk of losing their moniker of being the distinct nation. There's an outbreak of anti-Semitism, right? What happened to anti-Semitism, right? We tell the Jews, you're Jewish, you're different, we don't like you. As a crude example, we just had the most, the greatest outbreak of genocide and hatred and racism in history was in Germany. Germany was, over the 100 years preceding the Holocaust, was a hotbed of Jewish assimilation. And you'll notice these patterns are very clear in Jewish history, specifically at the locations where the Jewish people were most assimilated, were least distinct. That's where the forces of a nation being wicked, losing its a generation being totally wicked, losing its identity as being a distinct nation, being a loner nation, that's where that erupts, and the bad half of the same coin is exposed. So in essence, we say Mashiach is the culmination of the Jewish people being a distinct nation. And therefore, it's going to happen. Our choice is going to be, is it going to happen because of us, because of our righteousness, because of us actually fulfilling our destiny of being a distinct and a holy nation? Teaching the world about God. Yeah, that's what we're here. Teaching the world about morals, right? Being a nation that everyone admires. And then it's wonderful. We can have our cake and eat it too. Or we could choose collectively to assimilate, to forget about what it means, our special mission in this world, and Mashiach will come then as well. But then it'll come in a very, very different sense, meaning of the word. It'll come, but it's not going to be pleasant. Either way, the result is the same. And so that's the picture of the 6,000 years. We see that there's a process, there's a beginning, there's a progression, right? And then there's the end, right? We start off with learning about God, we learn about Torah, and then we learn about the Jewish people. These three elements are three facets. That is the progression of Jewish history, but really of the entire world's destiny. And also we see a little bit how God is going to intervene in history, right? God is going to assure. This is the blueprint. This was already written in the Talmud thousands of years ago, right? This is how it's going to happen, right? This is the destination. Our choice is what path are we going to use to get there. So what's interesting is that we kind of do have a say in the matter, even though we don't have a say in the matter. We can change the destination. The destination is set in stone, right? We call that Mashiach. It's set in stone. However, the path we choose to be this wonderful nation of distinct, of different, of teaching the world about God, that's in our hands. We get to teach the world about God because look what a model nation is. This is the nation of God. This is a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, as it says in Exodus. Or we can teach the world about God because the entire world will see our decimated carcass of a nation, and they'll say, look what the Almighty did to them. Look what the Almighty did because they had forsaken Him. And you know what? You read the Torah, you read the end of Leviticus and the middle of Deuteronomy where it talks about the bad things that will happen to Jewish people if they go astray. That's what it describes. And the exclamation point is always that the nations of the world are going to say, look what God did to the Jewish people. The result is the same. Right? The world is learning about God. The result is the same. We taught the entire world about God. We fulfilled our mission of being God's people in the world. But it's our choice how we're going to do that. That much is in our hands. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the forefathers. We're told about them in the book of Genesis. We're told that Abraham made a pact with God. More precisely, God made a pact with Abraham. They had an agreement. Right? We were chosen. We're the chosen nation. Now, I think it's important to mention, why are we the chosen nation? Was it just the Almighty randomly chose Abraham? He could have chosen anyone else? The answer is no. The more correct understanding is that Abraham chose God. Abraham, via his deduction and his skills and his intelligence and his tenacious dedication to teaching the world about God, Abraham was the one who was chosen because he chose to adopt this way of life. Abraham's ideas were very unpopular in his time. He was a man against everyone. It was him against the world. There were established, ready for thousands of years, perceptions about powers, the pagan way of life was just the way everyone went. And Abraham had the courage to stand up against that and to develop a philosophy which he disseminated to tens of thousands of people. He had a tremendous following, right, to teach the world about God. This was the first time that any human had endeavored on such an effort. Therefore, God was waiting for this person. Once God found them, then God says, I'm going to make a pact with you because you chose me. Now, Abraham developed this wonderful following. What happened to those? What happened to that movement? Where are all those Abraham's converts, so to speak? You know where they are? They're gone. Because one thing we'll find many, many, many times in Jewish history is that great ideas, great movements, great efforts almost always stumble from the get-go, right? You don't hit immediate success right away. We had the temple, right? The first temple was amazing. Right? It was a manifestation of God's presence in this world. What happened? It got destroyed. We did round 2. What happened to that? It got destroyed as well. Its efforts, it's trying to bring towards a certain goal, it always stumbles at the beginning. Right? Abraham had 2 sons. Right? He had a son Ishmael and a son Isaac. Once again, we see that Abraham's effort of teaching the world about God extended not only to the Jewish people, which is the direct continuation of Abraham, but also to Islam. And Isaac had a son Esau. Esau was a forefather of Rome, of Edom, of Rome, and Christianity. So in essence, Abraham is called Abraham. The Talmud, not the Talmud, the Torah says. Why is he called Abraham? Av Hamon Goim. He's the father of many nations. Abraham and his ideas, while in their most perfect sense, are perpetuated by the Jewish people, but he also has a hand in the general dissemination of monotheism throughout the whole world.
So why are the Muslims or whatever, Ishmael's people, why did they become such enemies?
Well, I would argue that the Muslims are much closer to what we believe than what the Christians are. But yes, this is life. Life is that it's not always going to be perfect, and we view Maimonides writes. He says yes, in the best case scenario, the Jewish people and the Jewish people alone would be the ones that would teach the world about God. But we didn't do our job well enough, and therefore the Almighty brought our kind of cousins, so to speak, right? The Christians and the Muslims, to do a job, albeit not quite as good a job, but to help us in our effort to teach the world about God. We're the primary influencers, but yes, we're going to have some help along the way. From who? From the descendants of Abraham as well. We have Isaac. We have Jacob. Jacob, all his kids are on the straight and narrow. Right? Isaac, Abraham has his troubles with Ishmael. Isaac has his troubles with Esau. Right? First time it didn't really work perfectly. Second time it didn't really work perfectly. Third time was perfect. Right? We see that again, similarly, the same pattern again and again.
Oh, what's perfect?
Well, it means Jacob being the perfect blend. All his 12 children are the 12 tribes of the Jewish people. Jacob is renamed Israel. Right? Because that's really when the nationhood of exclusive Jewish people began. Jacob.
Wait a minute, am I missing something? Was Joseph Jacob's son, or were there
Correct.
some folks in between?
Jacob had 12 sons.
The perfect ones sold him into slavery?
Yes. Well, Jacob had 12 sons, and we're told many times that all 12 sons were equally righteous. And these 12 sons formed the 12 tribes that the Jewish people were.
He sold one of them into slavery.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's part of the story. Yes.
Part
Well, I
of it
understand. I'm
was-
just the perfect part.
No, perfect
on.
as being the perfect a Jewish reality.
So
Per-
what
that's a better way to
happened
say it.
all,
That
like,
makes sense.
outside of the 12 brothers, there was cousins and all kinds of stuff. They just fall into the different tribes, like meld
Well,
into
all biological Jews, at least Jews from the time of the Exodus, they were all part of the tribes, right?
Okay.
Already, we envision the splitting of the sea, and it's very important for us to have some sort of imagery in our head for it. But we imagine the sea splitting like that, right? If you actually study a little bit of the text, you'll find that it actually split into 12. Right? Each tribe had their own path, and you know
Is
what?
that right?
That's right. Yes.
I never knew that.
Well, you learn something new every day,
All the
right?
time.
Here.
That's why I'm in all these classes.
Okay, but
all
I
the
do
time.
remember in the movie they line up in their tribe.
And we
Yeah.
know that
Yes, they did.
I'm saying that the reality where the Jewish people, had some sort of tribal structure that existed for hundreds of years down the line, right? Why is it called Judea and Samaria, the West Bank? Because that's where the tribe of Judah lived. The tribe Israel was partitioned into 12 sections,
Right.
one for each one of the
Right.
tribes. The tribes lived together.
I thought Israel was a country separate from Judea.
No, well, we'll get to that. But before there was before it split,
Oh, okay.
right? That split only 400 years after they captured Israel.
But during the time when when we're slaves, we weren't grouped into tribes at that time.
Well, it was
We-
families. They
Families,
they were
all
part. But families coming from a similar ancestor.
Right. Okay.
Jacob is the one who is really Israel. He's called Israel because he's the Jewish people. Now, Jacob, we know, was told, that he had to develop certain skills. And this is, once again, we're told that Maseh Avot Siman Labanim, the actions of our forefathers are a light or a guidance to their descendants. Right? The challenges that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had to undergo are the same challenges that we will go through again and again. Right? Jacob was someone who had to learn, who had to develop certain skills that weren't natural. He was a very honest person, but he had to learn to be wily enough, cunning enough to deal with his father-in-law, Lavan.
Yeah.
Right? He was not one who was prone to battle, but he had to prepare himself for battle for the struggle with Esau. And this is the struggles that we collectively as a nation will have to develop. We're going to go into Israel. We're going to have to develop laws. What do Jews know about laws? Right? What do Jews know about enforcement of laws? Right? We're going to have to mature as a nation in the same way Jacob, our forefather, had to mature from Jacob into Israel. What happens? Jacob's bliss as having 12 sons, they're all in the straight and narrow, they're all well behaved, is quite short-lived. And this is another pattern you'll see in history, where the times where there's struggle greatly outnumber the time where things are really, really good. Right? He has Joseph sold into slavery. Eventually, the entire Jewish people, or entire the Jewish family, as it was then, end up in Egypt. And before you know it, they're enslaved. They're in exile. Now, if you flash forward a couple of 100 years, you'll find that they end up in different exiles. There's the Babylonian exile, where they're kicked out of Israel. There's the Persian exile, where their very existence is threatened. There's what's called the Greek exile, right, where the Hanukkah story is, where they had internal turmoil. There's the Roman exile, the temple's destroyed, the Jews are sent out. Right? Jews live under Babylonian control, right? The Byzantine control. They live under the Ottoman Turks. They deal with Almohads in Spain and North Africa. Right? They have to go through the pogroms, right? Throughout Europe, they deal with the exile and the expulsion, the Inquisition, and the Holocaust, and so many of these things in different nations. Once again, this is a clear pattern. Everyone knows there's the wandering Jew. There's the Jew who ends up everywhere. We've lived everywhere. We've been persecuted everywhere. Our existence has been threatened in every place we've lived, and that starts with Egypt. And one of the answers, this is not the only answer, but one of the explanations given as to why does our nation specifically, our nation, the nation that was chosen or that chose this path, this responsibility to teach the world about God. Why are we the ones who specifically have to constantly be going from place to place under oppression, under oppressive regimes, and have to withstand so much? Many answers given. One of the answers, I think, is that every nation has the things that are remarkable about it, about its character, about its way of living, about its way of treating its citizens, about its way of interacting. It has the things that are, the less admirable. We are not only supposed to be the chosen or the chosed or the nation that chose, we're also supposed to be the most remarkable nation. We're supposed to be a nation that is the culmination of all the benefits of every nation. We're supposed to be the super nation. Now, how are you going to become a super nation when you live in your own cocoon? The answer is that we're going to have to spend a few hundred years in Egypt, a few hundred years under the Romans, a few hundred years with the Greeks, a few hundred years with the in Spain, a few hundred years in Poland, Lithuania, Germany, a few hundred years. Well, not so many hundred years, but in England and France, and collectively we're going to assemble all the qualities of all the different nations and bring them all together back to Israel.
How interesting. What about the America?
America has wonderful character traits. Wonderful.
Right, but that falls in as the learning and everything of here. But here we have all the assimilation. And all
Well,
that.
but that's not a isolated incident, an isolated fact in Jewish history. And you know what? If we don't shape up, we're going to pay for it. Pay for it quite dearly.
Is it true, Rabbi, that Jacob knew everything that was going to happen in the world, but took it to his death with him? That God told him?
Well,
I thought that was Moshe that knew all that.
Didn't know
well,
that was
well, like
Jacob,
this.
but
Okay, so the definition of a prophet is, in the Jewish definition of a prophet, is someone who, through his or her stages of their growth, of their progression, in their character development, in their scholarship, right? One of the levels is called prophecy, which means they're able to communicate with God, or God can communicate with them. And God can also tell them what's going to be in the future. So we have the prophet Jeremiah, who's writing about things that didn't happen for a few years. He foretells, right? On the banks of Al Naharot Bavel, we sat on the rivers of Bavel, and we were crying, and we were just exiled. We were in Israel now for hundreds of years, and we're exiles to Babylonia. And they asked us to sing, and they say, how can we sing? How can we sing God's song on a foreign soil? Jeremiah wrote that hundreds of years before it happened.
And it happened.
Yes, so the reality of someone knowing information before it happened, that a prophet can do. That being said, a prophet is not necessarily told, they're on a need-to-know basis. Now, that being said, we're told in the Talmud that Jacob wanted to tell the Jewish people the kates. What does kates mean? Kates means the end, or the goal, or the ultimate, or the culmination. Now, does that mean that he knew every event? No. It means that there's some insight that he wanted to share, and he wasn't able to share it. What that is, I don't know. So you don't share it. Yeah?
A couple of weeks ago, the teacher we had confused me greatly about prophets, and that because of worshiping idols, by making that a really bad thing, that we gave up having prophets. And when I approached my son about it, he said I didn't understand what he was saying, because he told us that Moshe was the last prophet. And my son says he means to say that Moshe was the last prophet that talked to God, but there have been prophets since, but he did not explain it to us that way, and I thought
Yeah,
that
so
didn't
this,
sound right. All right.
so let me explain this. Moses, what the Talmud calls this, actually I think is a Greek word. Moses had a prophecy by the level of aspaklaria mi'ira, which means that Moses was able to communicate to God not with direct instructions, as opposed to all the other prophets in Jewish history weren't given directives, instructions, were like do X, Y, or Z. Rather, they were given imagery. Right? They had some sort of vision, and they had to interpret. Right, and they were all sleeping. Right, Moses was able to communicate to God, but he had clear instructions. So that's why Moses, his prophecy was on a different realm than others' prophecy. But the last prophets are all much later, like Malachi and Haggai, all the way, 900 years after Moses.
So we
Now, why are we now a non-profit organization? There's a reason.
I love it. That's good.
Yeah, the reason is that like we said, prophecy is not something that you get overnight. Right? If in Jewish life, if Joseph Smith comes to the Jewish court and says, "I'm a prophet," you know what they do? They don't say, "Oh, let's hear what you have to say." They execute him right away, because that's a false prophet. A prophet is someone who has reached the level of prophecy. It's a certain stage of your growth. It's a stage that's way beyond our capacities to even conceptualize. But it's a certain stage of your growth, right? A great, 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 great person, like Moses, isn't going to get prophecy. It's not like the luck of the draw. It's not like you just a lottery. There's some lottery. You could just win the prophecy lottery. It doesn't work like that, right? It's a certain stage of your growth. That being said, as we view, with regards to Torah and piety and character and behavior, we view the time since Sinai as regression. So therefore, the closer you are to the Sinai experience, the easier it is for you to reach those high levels of character. So therefore, we could say that the levels of character and scholarship and wisdom and insight that Maimonides reached in the 13th century is something that we cannot, or actually 12th century. It's beyond the capacity of anyone today to reach that. Why? Because he was, 900 years closer to Sinai than we were. Similarly, the levels of scholarship and character reached by the members of the Mishnah, who wrote the Mishnah, is also beyond even Maimonides' level, etc., etc. Therefore, came a point in time where people lost the capacity to reach prophecy. That level of greatness was already beyond the reach of people in that generation.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
You need that, straighten that out.
You know what, as a PS, I think that Torch ought to do classes on prophets, because I don't know anything about any of them.
Read the books.
Well, I have the Tanakh,
It's more fun to have a class.
but it'd be nice to read it and then get your insight,
Yeah.
It's a PS.
Okay, so let's move on. We're only up to like the fourth item here, but I think we talked a little bit about the core ideas that I wanted to talk, so we can now zip through here. So we have the Jewish people are enslaved. Moses is born. We have the Exodus. We have the Exodus. We have the splitting of the sea. We have the 10 plagues. We have the Jewish people, are getting food coming from heaven, right? They're living a supernatural existence. They have the most momentous and significant event in history, the revelation at Sinai, an event unparalleled in human history, right? An event that has not even been replicated in claim. No one even claimed to have an event of such magnitude. Why did no one claim to ever have such an event of such magnitude? I apologize. How come no nation ever claimed that God spoke to multitudes of people? Every nation and all 40 or 50,000 of them that exist today, all of them share a similar narrative. God speaks to a single prophet. We're the only one that says our nation was founded on in a totally different. The structure of the development of our religion is totally different. We have God speaking to the multitudes. We have God speaking not just to Moses. God spoke to everyone saw. Read Exodus. It says it clearly. Everyone saw it. Therefore, we know for sure that this event is a historical reality. It's incontrovertible. Why is it incontrovertible? Because it's not possible to convince millions of people that they saw something that they didn't see. Everyone saw this wonderful event of prophecy at Sinai. And these people were the same people that got the book. These were the same people that were hand-delivered the book. It wasn't like they got the book hundreds of years later. The same people who experienced the Sinai experience received the book from Moses that says they experienced the Sinai experience.
Each one got a copy?
Well, each one got a copy. But the point is that Moses actually wrote 13 copies. So, but that was Moses himself. Other people copied them as well. The point being is that we have here a formation of a religion where God is just interacting and intervening and supervising in a supernatural way. They have a 40-year period where with the Exodus, and there's 40 years in the desert. What happens in 40 years in the desert? Where do they drink water from? What they had to stay by the oasis? The Torah says that Moses came and took a stick and hit a rock, and their water came shooting out. They just drank from the water for 40 years. This is a historical reality. It's beyond our perception. How is that possible? But we know it's for sure true. Why? Because the Jewish people tenaciously observed the Torah and had the same book and taught that to their children, even though they received it, or the original people that received it from Moses themselves. And they were the subjects of that narrative. And they obviously would not fulfill the Torah if they knew it was a bunch of baloney. And the Torah says, what happened tonight? It's true. There's no other way around it. They had food coming from heaven. They had, it just rained every night. You woke up in the morning, you went outside, and you have food. And the more righteous you are, the closer the food was to your tent. So if you were super righteous, it arrived on your door. If not, you had to walk a mile to get it. But it was there. And you're thirsty? Just go to the rock. The rock is just spewing out water, right? What about clothing? The Torah says the clothing grew with them. What about mountains? How'd they all climb the mountains? Well, they were surrounded by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud of smoke during the day, and the smoke leveled the mountains. Like, this is a supernatural existence. They have Moses. Moses is in direct communication with God. Moses teaches them Torah. Right? This 40 years, well, starting with the Exodus, the wonderful events of the Exodus, and these 40 years really are years that are unparalleled, even in Jewish history. Because as the formation of the nation, it's very important for them to know, to feel intimately, to know on a tangible level that God exists. Therefore, God's involved. Like, you can't deny God when food comes falling from heaven, raining down from heaven. You can't deny God when you see a rock spewing water to feed millions, to give water to drink for millions. When Moses is able to predict events before they happened. When you're able to vanquish mighty armies with a bunch of recently emancipated slaves. No one could deny God. And because the mission of the Jewish people is too crucial for there to be any mistakes. Everyone on an individual level, it does not equal to the Jewish people as a nation. This is the world's mission. The world's mission is us. And if not for us, if we screw up, if we're not cemented in our faith, in our belief, in our dedication to our craft, then the world's it's not going to happen. Right? It has to happen. Therefore, the Almighty says, there's be 40 years, you're going to be wandering through the desert. For one day, you can't stop relying on God. For one day, you can't. Because you know what? If God stops, you're fried to the death. What are you going to do? You have a million people encamped in the desert. What are you going to do? Little kids. What do you do if you don't have God? What do you do if you don't have faith? You're toast. Literally. Right? You're toast. Right? It's trying to teach the Jewish people. Right? It's to try to train them to make it safe second nature to believe in God. What happens at the end of 40 years? They're on the doorstep of going into Israel. Moses dies. Moses dies.
He dies before they go.
They never go. He never goes into Israel.
We know that he doesn't go, but I thought he stood there and watched everybody go. And then
He just got to see the land from the mountain.
Right.
That's it.
Moses dies. What's the next thing that happens after Moses dies in the Torah?
Joshua.
The Torah ends. We're told by that, I think, that we could deduce from that is that...
Oh, because then he wasn't talking to God to get any more story.
Well, yeah, but I guess maybe Joshua could have continued the Torah. We're told that the Torah is a book of instructions. The word Torah means instruction. Instructions for what? Instructions for whom? Instructions for us. Instructions for the Jewish people. As an individual and as a collective nation. As an individual, become the best person you could possibly become. Become a perfect person. As a nation, become a perfect nation. What's the ultimate embodiment, the ultimate manifestation? Who is the personification of this reality? Moses. The Torah is really a book about Moses. Right? Because Moses is a manifestation of what the Jewish people ought to be in their best, in their best, and what we have to strive for. Maimonides tells us, every person could be like Moses. Every person could be like Moses. But wait a minute, Rabbi, you just said that we can't be a prophet. Moses was a prophet. Right? That's a good question. The answer is that yes, while we cannot be a prophet, right, our spectrum of greatness is limited. Right? Our prospect, our potential for greatness is much, much more curtailed than Moses was. Still, we can maximize that potential. Moses was granted with an incredible potential. His prospects were incredible, and he maximized and utilized every little bit of it. We could do the same. We're given a tiny little microscopic spectrum of greatness.
So what you're saying
But
is,
our job is to be like Moses. We got to utilize it, and we have to become as great as we can possibly become.
so you're saying that Moses was the manifestation of what the Jews should aspire to be, right?
Absolutely.
Basically.
But
Okay, I
yet
want
we
to make sure
wanted
I've got it.
to make him like an idol to worship him, but yet we are.
No, we're admiring him. We're using him as an example. We're using him as an inspiration. We're using him as a teacher. There has never been a claim that Moses was a god. There's never been a claim, and there never was a claim. The Jewish people were intimately aware of his faults. We knew it. God criticizes Moses more than any other person in the Torah. Right? Moses is very much a human. Yet he's a human who has prophecy. And what kind of prophecy? The highest level of prophecy. He's a human whose soul didn't want to leave his body. His soul said that there's no place I'd rather be than in Moses' body. Right? While other souls were told, the souls cannot stand being human bodies. The Midrash says that this body and the soul are like the two opposite ends of a magnet. They repel each other. Moses' soul found quite harmony in his body. So yes, he is someone we admire, even though we know that God tells him you don't have faith. Moses, you don't have faith, you get punished. Right? We're aware of Moses being a human, yet we aspire to be like him. So Moses dies, the Torah ends, the instructions end, the mitzvahs end. There are no more mitzvahs, right? The Torah, all 613 mitzvahs aren't contained in the Torah. The rest of the Jewish Bible, what's the purpose of that? Why do we have 24 books of the Jewish Bible? What's wrong with just the 5 books of Moses? The answer is that the 5 books of Moses are the laws. And that's what we need. That's what we would suffice with that for laws. The book of Joshua is to teach us about the division of the land of Israel, which tribe gets which section of Israel. And if the Jewish people were morally upright, if the Jewish people never sinned, that's all we would need. We need the 5 books of Moses and the first book of Joshua, just to know where the Jewish people, where the division of the land is. However, because we sinned, and because we made mistakes, because we erred and we strayed away from the golden path, therefore we were punished. And therefore the leaders of each generation took it as a responsibility to teach the Jewish people what happens when you screw up. Therefore we have the book of Judges, and the book of Judges, and we have the book of Kings, and the book of Samuel, and we have all these books because there are lessons that we can take. Lessons. But it's very important to note that the instructions, the mitzvahs, only come from the 5 books of Moses. That's it. Everything else is not. It could be rabbinic. Well, we could talk about that maybe. It could be rabbinic law, but it's not Torah law. All 613 are contained in the Torah. How are we doing?
Okay, question.
Question.
The
Shoot.
5 book of Moses, then the book of Joshua would make 6, and Samuel and Kings and Judges, those are other books.
Well,
Or
yeah.
are they in the 5 books?
No, there's 5 books of Moses.
Right.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the Torah. If you look to page 3, you'll see on the top of the pyramid, you'll see the Torah, the 5 books. There's the book, the prophets, which is 8 books, and the writings, which is 11 books. And the writings are, think of like Ecclesiastes and a book of Esther, a book of Ruth, the book of Lamentations, the book of Proverbs, the book of Tehillim, Psalms, right, etc. Prophets
Song
think
of Songs.
Right, Song of Songs, very good. Prophets think of Samuel, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, right? The book of Kings, the book of Judges, the book of Joshua. Those are the prophets and the writings. And these are holy books. They're part of the Jewish Bible. They were canonized. I don't get the whole canonization process, but these are the books that were canonized. These are there's special laws about these books, but the Torah is above all. The Torah has it's a difference. It's not. We can't say that these are 24 books that have equal status.
I just want to make one comment.
Yes.
I know that this is something that's second nature to you, but I don't know about the other guys. But my son Joshua is Orthodox. And whenever I've gone with him or I've gone into anybody's home, it just blows me away that everybody has a bookshelf or shelves filled with all these books. It's so goosebumpy.
Well, we are a nation that has always valued the scholar. We're a nation that we never had illiteracy. We never had illiteracy. At a time when Europe was 99% illiterate, we had 100% literacy rates. 100%. We always value the scholar because, you know why? Because the Torah is our lifeblood. We're here, with Jewish people, we have a mission. If we don't fulfill the mission, we're dead, we're done. We have to. It has to happen. It cannot happen unless we're intimately engaged with the Torah.
It's just amazing.
Yes. Okay, now I want to give a little bit of picture of what the Jewish leadership or Jewish authority, like, well, what happens? Okay, Moses was the leader. You had a problem, you had a question, you had a misunderstanding, you had a doubt. You go to Moses. Moses in the book of Numbers establishes what's called a Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is a Jewish Supreme Court. Supreme Court. So from the time of Moses, 900 years, you have a duality where there's always a Sanhedrin, centralized Jewish leadership, and there's also always prophets. And these prophets and this, obviously, Sanhedrin, which continued up to the Common Era, to the 2nd century of the Common Era, these things mitigated, lessened, attenuated all problems. So you had a problem, you had a disagreement, you go to the prophet. You have a halachic uncertainty, you either go to the prophet or you go to the Sanhedrin. Right? We talk about transmission of Torah and how did they maintain it and how was it transmitted. Besides from the fact that the Jewish people were always dedicated to study, and study was vital. Like it was, Maimonides says you cannot live in a city that doesn't have a Jewish school. You can't. You're not allowed to live in it.
Is that the Beis Din? Is that the same as the Sanhedrin?
The Sanhedrin is a kind of Beis Din. Beis Din just means a court of Jewish law that can be comprised of as little as 3 justices. Sanhedrin had 71.
Oh, okay.
70 plus Moses is 71. And they would anytime there was an argument, 2 rabbis in the city had a disagreement about a Jewish law, they brought it to Sanhedrin or to the prophet, and that's why we're able to go for hundreds of years without any arguments. There's no arguments. There's no disagreements. There's no discrepancies in behavior.
Did you say it was 900 years? Is that
Well,
what
it went about 1100 years, 1200 years
So
before
when did
we
become Jewish?
we were Jewish. We had arguments about political arguments. We had arguments about more of philosophical arguments, but we didn't have behavioral arguments. Like, what does it mean to be a Jew? What are we supposed to do? Like, what does Shabbos look like? What does the temple look like? What does it mean to pray? All these things were they're part of the law. They were the law. The law was clear.
And we needed 70 judges. Why?
Well, but you're saying 70 as opposed to less? Well, that was what was established. We read it a few weeks ago in the Parsha. It was established already by Moses as being central Jewish leadership, and the reason why it's the importance of central Jewish leadership cannot be understated. Because if you look at what happened when the Jewish people lost their central leadership, then they ran into the risk of forgetting the Torah. Because the second you don't have that fail safe where you could always go back to the Sanhedrin if you have any questions, well, then everyone's on their own.
I was gonna say,
What happens when
doing
you're
what
like,
they wanna do.
yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And at that time, that's when they made a decision to give everyone a book called the Mishnah and the Talmud. You're on your own, but this is like a portable Sanhedrin. And we have today, you walk into everyone's house, what they really have is a portable Sanhedrin. Because that was a codification, that was a collaboration, that was all the members of the Sanhedrin, plus 1,000 rabbis came together and says, we have to write the definitive book, the book of all books, to answer all questions that would potentially arise in future generations. Because there has to always be some central safety net for the Jewish people that they shouldn't forget their Torah. So if it's not Moses, it has to be the Sanhedrin. If it's not the Sanhedrin, it has to be the prophets. The second the prophets end, the Sanhedrin takes a much heightened role. That's what we're introduced to Ezra and the men of the Great Assembly. We temporarily expanded the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is about to be disbanded. They have to write down the Mishnah. There's no other way. There's no other way.
So that's the writing of the oral law.
Correct. Which we can view as like a sort of a mobile Sanhedrin. It's important to note that it's prohibited to write down the oral law. It's a prohibition of the Torah. Why? Because it's much better when it's fluid. Right? It's much better when it's dynamic. The second you relegate something to being written, then it loses its its ability to be malleable, to be flexible. Right? It becomes set in stone. So that's why it was never codified into writing until it had to be, or else the Jewish people would cease to exist. Okay, so that's a little bit of a picture of what Jewish leadership was after Moses. Now, they lived for 40 years with Moses under this supernatural way of existing, right? The food was taken care of, the clothing was taken care of, everything was taken care of for them. They just were able to study Torah. God was involved with them in their lives. Moses dies. They're about to enter Israel. And in Israel, they're going to have to deal with life almost the way we deal with life.
Yeah.
Then they have to go into battle. Then they have to develop a political system, a court system. Then they have to deal with the realities of people bickering and fighting over property. Right? Everyone's going to have to find jobs. Everyone's going to have to work for a living. They're going to have to take what they learned and integrate that into a more, it's more of a traditional life and way of living. And we'll see this was something that they, had a hard time doing. And Joshua was viewed as the direct continuation of Moses. Right? Way before Moses died, right? God tells him Joshua is the successor. And he took Joshua with him wherever he went. And everyone knew that Moses, the greatest man that ever lived, the man that spoke to God face to face, him and the Almighty chose Joshua as his successor. So Joshua's leadership was never challenged. Joshua was viewed as a continuation of Moses. Right? Talmud tells that Moses' face was like the sun, Joshua's was like the moon. Right? That he was a reflection of Moses. And you know what? If you look in the sky and you try to measure from our perspective the actual size of the sun, yes, the sun is 27,000 times the size of the moon, but for us, they're identical in the size. Yeah. Yes, Moses was much greater than Joshua, but for us, for the Jewish people, they look the same. Right? Yes, it's not quite as bright, but it's the same thing. Right? Joshua dies. And this ushers in a 300 and some odd year period of tremendous turmoil. If you want to know a little more about it, I advise you to read the book of Judges. And the book of Judges, this is where we
He
meet.
didn't have a successor that
Uh-huh.
he did not have a successor.
Well, we have 16 judges. We're familiar with Devorah. She was the female judge. We had a female judge as well. We were way ahead of the curve with having female leadership. Gideon and
Why did we
Samson.
retreat?
Huh?
Why did we retreat?
From that?
Yeah.
Who says we did? There's always been great Jewish leaders.
God.
Huh?
Great great women Orthodox rabbis.
Well, the moniker rabbi wasn't given, but
Okay. Anyway,
yeah, but the point is that
good point, though.
no, it's a good point. But 3,200 years ago, the leader of Jewish people was a woman, and she was the undisputed leader, and the men came to her for the point is we were ahead of the curve on that,
Yes, certainly at that time, there were no women ever allowed to do anything.
Women weren't allowed to vote till 1921, right?
Yeah,
So
well, they couldn't.
we're way ahead of it. Yes. Anyhow, we have 16 judges, and now the time of the judges was marked by tremendous chaos, turmoil, infighting with the nations. Right, the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, was populated by 31 different tribes or kingdoms. We had to battle with each one of them. We were constantly skirmishing with the Philistines. We were skirmishing with the Midianites. We didn't capture Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the last of the 31 kingdoms that we captured. We didn't capture it till the times of David. We had the ark. We didn't have the temple yet. The ark and the tabernacle. Those were in Shiloh. Right? We had like a temporary holding place it wasn't a full temple. It was just the core of the temple, which is the ark and the tabernacle. And we didn't have Jewish kings. And if you look at the book of Judges and the last verse, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his eyes. It was chaos. Description of chaos. Along came a man who changed it all. A man that the Talmud tells us is equal to Moses and Aaron in certain respects. Who is that? The great prophet Samuel. The great prophet Samuel was the last of the 16 judges. And he was the one who anointed the very first king.
Hold on one minute.
Yes. He was one who anointed the very first king. Who did he anoint? King Saul. And King Saul was the leader of leaders, was the quintessential king, was the mighty warrior, was the tallest of men, was the smartest of men, was the greatest scholar.
All right, so Samuel is the last of the 16 judges, becomes
And he anoints Saul. How does he anoint Saul? Saul came to him and says, I'm missing my donkey. Because that's what you do when you had a prophet. Remember, the Jewish people still had prophets. He comes and says, give me my donkey. He's like, oh, actually, your donkey's over here, but you're also king. And he poured oil in his head. And so they used to be anointed. Like the term Mashiach means anointed. Right? Saul's called Mashiach because he was anointed. He used to pour oil. That was the method of coronation of a king. And this is another great example of how great leaders sometimes falter. Right? Saul, if you had to make a prototype for a king, it would look like Saul. Tall, handsome, the greatest scholar, the greatest warrior. The complete package. What happened? He screwed up royally. Right? He had only a 2-year reign, and his kingdom had to be forcibly removed from him, and it was given to David. Who was David? David was an afterthought. He was the youngest kid in his family. He was a gingy. Everyone said, we did to him like this. He was a gingy. He wasn't strong. He was feeble. He was a nebbish. And what we'll find a lot of times is that sometimes a king or a great leader has to be a man of the people. Has to be someone who knows what people are going through.
How did he screw up Saul?
Well, Saul was given instructions to destroy to Agag and destroy Amalek, and he made a decision to spare the king. His name was Agag, and some animals. Even though Samuel told him, to kill everything, even the animals. Right. And then, even though Saul was still practicing as the king, but Samuel tells him, God doesn't view you as the king. God views David as the king. So then he goes on, and then David's kingdom began with his infighting with Saul. So Saul was going after him, and Saul was chasing him in the caves, and etc., etc.
He became jealous of him.
Exactly. Saul tried to kill him, and Saul tells him, "Go get me 100 foreskins of the Philistines."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So he goes and gets him 200, and he says, so he was married to his daughter. It was a disaster. You read the book of Samuel. It talks about it, right? It's book of Samuel, book of Kings, talk about David and Solomon and Shlomo. But the point is that David is viewed as the quintessential king. Subsequently, from the times of David, every king had to be a descendant of the Davidic line. Right? He is royalty in the Jewish people. Right? Mashiach is called Mashiach ben David, the son of David. All kings now come from David. And David, and subsequently Solomon, his son Solomon, they mark the utopia. The Jewish people and the monarchy being fully established. That was a time where they fully captured all of Israel. He bought Jerusalem. Right? He didn't quite build the temple yet. Solomon built the temple, but it was years of prosperity. It was years of harmony. It was years where there was not so much infighting. It was years when the Jewish people had dedication towards this newly built temple. They had the temple. They had the great king. They had the wonderful future that would look so bright and look like it would never end. Right? But it did. And it went. And after David ruled for 40 years, from the age of 30 to the age of 70, when he died, his son Solomon was 12 years old when he became king. Subsequently, he, like David, ruled for 40 years, and then he died. And when he died is when we have the major schism that changed the trajectory of Jewish history.
So his son Solomon takes over.
His son takes over. He builds the temple. It's amazing. And those years, the 40 of David and the 40 of Solomon, marked the peak of the Jewish monarchy. After Solomon dies, there's a little bit of a disagreement amongst his son, who is Rechavam, His son Rechavam was his successor. He made several blunders at the beginning of his reign. He received poor counsel. He decided to be punitive in his taxation. He decided to listen to the advice of the young whippersnappers over the advice of the more sage, elderly advisors. And therefore there was a schism. There was a break. There was the northern kingdom seceded. And from then on, for the next 100 and some odd years, you had a divided Israel. So a tremendous peak of Solomon is quickly eliminated. You have two nations. You have the nation of the kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Judea in the south, and the kingdom of Israel in the north. They disallowed access to the kingdom of Judea in the south, so they couldn't go to the temple. They built their own temples, and they ended up building temples to the gods of Zeus and to idolatry. And all the kings of the north had the opportunity to try to kind of repent and mend the fences, but they were all idolaters. And in the year about the year 550 before the Common Era, it's about 150 years after this two kingdoms, you have the Assyrians, the Assyrians who overrun the northern kingdom of Israel, and the 10 tribes are displaced. They are removed. They're gone. We're told in the Talmud they're never coming back. And in their place, we have the Shomron, right? The Samaritans are put in their place. Right? Sancheriv destroys the northern kingdom of Israel. He takes them and moves them out. They're gone. We don't know where they are. There's perhaps some people say that there's some legends that everyone claims that they know where they are. They're in Nepal. They're in Africa. They're in India. We don't know, but we're told in Talmud that they're not coming back. Right? They had reached the level of being steeped in idolatry for too long for them to have any rehabilitation. Sancheriv continues his march towards Jerusalem. He lays a siege on Jerusalem, and we actually have in the British Museum we have some sort of I think it's either hieroglyphics or papyrus or some sort of engraved. I don't know exactly what they have, but it's some sort of the boasting of Sancheriv of I'm about to capture Jerusalem. He does not capture Jerusalem. Right? Jerusalem and the kingdom of Judea is still close enough, still righteous enough to withstand this. God says, I'm not giving up on these people. Right? They still have the temple, and they still have somewhat of a righteous streak to them. They're spared, and they have, and from then on, when we talk about the Jewish people, we talk about these people, right? And we're called Jews. Why? Because from the kingdom of Judea, right? Yehudim, from Yehuda. Now, some of the 10 northern tribes, some people seek refuge amongst the greater Jewish people. That's why today, Jewish people, or from this kingdom of Judea, we're comprised of a mix of all the 12 tribes, because some of them did come and join us.
Oh, okay, so the ones in the north that got dispersed, some of them went down to the
Correct.
south. They didn't
Correct. Now, how long did we have? We didn't have much longer. About another couple of 100 years, 150 years later, we have the Babylonians destroying the first temple. And for us, this was the last of the degradation of the Jewish people. We had the peak. We had Solomon. We had these 40 years where we were a unified nation. We had a temple, right? It went south right after Solomon died. There were some poor decisions, and there weren't significant efforts made to prevent the erosion of the northern kingdom. They're gone. The southern kingdom also had the final nail in their coffin with the temple being destroyed. And the first temple, that's the temple. That was the temple that we had all the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash. Everything that's described in the Torah, that was in the first temple. Second temple, while being still a temple that had many of the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash, didn't quite have it all. It didn't quite have the same flavor that existed in the first temple.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Then, we talk about the reason why the second temple was destroyed. In other classes we've talked about it. What is the overall reason why the first temple was destroyed?
Well, we're told it's destroyed because they were negligent in the mitzvahs, and especially the three cardinal mitzvahs,
Okay.
which
They
is
started worshiping idols, you said.
idolatry. They had idolatry
Adultery and
issues,
murder.
adultery and murder. Yes.
Okay.
So that's that. This we kind of see how the Jewish people, when they're great, when they're behaving right, they can have it all. And during the times of Solomon, there was nothing like it. In fact, it was so good that during the times of Solomon, they didn't accept any converts. During the time of David and Solomon, those 80 years, there were no converts that accepted the Jewish people. Why? Because the Jewish people had it all. They had their cake and they ate it too. They had it all. They had riches. They had peace. They had prosperity. They had everything you could possibly want. And then, therefore, they didn't accept any converts. All the converts we suspected them that they just wanted to, join the bandwagon. They weren't necessarily sincere. But that quickly eroded. It quickly eroded, and the culmination of that is the destruction of the first temple. I think we'll stop over here because I don't want to go too far over.
No, but I want to ask you how the star became the symbol of us.
Oh, I have no idea what the star. I have no idea.
It came from David.
Some say that it comes from David. I don't know. I never researched that.
And that's when they put on when you go to the thing, it has the star engraved in it by the wall and all, by the David entrance or so.
I don't know much about it, but I think that it's I don't know how significant it is in macro Jewish history, but I think we kind of get a picture of what happened, what were the stories, what were the major themes, and how we we have perspective. We see that the same things, the patterns of repeat themselves, and the opportunities that we have, and the impact that we will bring to the world. Well, that's happening regardless. It's going to happen. It's going to happen either because of us or in spite of us. And I think the lesson for us is, as individuals, but even more so as part of a community, is that we see time and again. We see that the Jewish people, when they made poor decisions, when they deviate away from God, then all the other aspects of their lives head south as well. But when we are, following what's expected of us, right? When we dot the I's and cross the T's, as we say, when we fulfill our mission, when we do what's right, we can have it all.
So, Rabbi, skip ahead to today and what's going on in Israel. What column you put?
Like I said, every great achievement that we ever had, it's always going to first falter. There's always going to be some missteps on the way, right? We have that with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have that with the first temple, second temple, and hopefully the third temple. We have that with Israel as well. Israel did it start off exactly the way? This is the rebuilding of Israel that's going to be, that's going to culminate in us, all the Jewish people going back to Israel, all the people readopting Torah. Not quite yet, but we're a lot closer than we were 100 years ago. We're a lot closer than we were 50 years ago, right? Israel's now Israel start.
Are they making right decisions now in your mind? I guess is what
I'm saying this on a specific I got called the historian.
I think you are.
He's a scholar. That's really what he is.
But I think you're asking from a micro perspective, should they bomb Gaza? Is that what you want to know?
No, not that. Just that. Let me put it in the right way. In the last, say, 10 years, have we been following the right path? The people that are there, or are they getting away from the religion? Are they?
Let me say it this way: the founders of the religion, right? The first that came up with the idea was actually not quite the first that came up with the idea. The idea was already spawned before Herzl. But Herzl was an assimilated Jew whose kids converted to Christianity. He has no Jewish descendants.
Right. When I heard that blew me away.
He's going to be the one who's going to bring the Jewish people back to Israel? Really? And you fast forward to the Zionist movement. We're going to develop a nation like any other nation. We're not different than anyone else. Are you the Jewish nation where Jewish prostitutes be arrested by Jewish policemen? That's what one of the original Zionists says. That's what we're looking for. We want to be no different than everyone else. Really?
So what-
That's
We
what it
just
means.
want our own place to
That's-
live. That was all.
Yeah, it could be
was, right?
Uganda.
Yeah.
It could be Uganda.
Yeah.
Who
Well,
cares?
they were thinking
They
of
just-
things like that, right, exactly.
That was the
Just want our
beginning.
own place to
So
live.
really, I found out I am not a Zionist after.
No, well,
Yeah.
but the point is that. But look at Israel today. Israel today is the most flourishing Jewish community on the planet. It's a today that has grown tenfold. It started off with 600,000 Jews. Now there's 6 million Jews there. It started off being totally secular. Now look at the 30-40% of Israel is now observant or some
Really?
degree.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
How do you define flourishing?
Well, it's flourishing, which means that it means it's growing,
every
it's
way,
developing.
in
There's
every
people
way.
Right,
moving there.
It's the center
It's a
of,
Jewish place. Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
that
Good.
comes
But
along.
not only that,
And
it's
would
the
that
land.
happen if everybody went and hunkered down and studied Torah?
You know what? It's the land.
No, it has
too.
to be,
Mark Twain wrote about Israel in the late
I mean, would
1800s.
Israel would
He
still
went
be
there. It was
there
like a
if everybody
desert.
Said, I'm not,
It was a
I'm
desert,
Not serving
and now-
in the army. I'm too busy studying Torah. and being
Well,
You can
yeah,
do
but-
both. They study in the army, but that's silly. Why can't they do
hard
both?
question.
No, but no
That's
one.
a good question.
Yeah.
No
That's
one-
a good question, but you
No
know,
one ever advocated that everyone should be studying Torah. In fact, right, the pioneer of this agreement with with Ben Gurion was the Chazon Ish, who made the agreement that those who study Torah full time shouldn't be part of the army. That was the Chazon Ish. They made the agreement in 1952, and he himself said that if there's no one going to the army, then we have to go. Right? The argument was that we don't need an army. The argument was that if there are people that are studying Torah and you have a fully functioning army, then those people should be obviated from the responsibility of taking on the spiritual and the physical toll of protecting
that
Israel.
makes sense.
Huh?
So it makes sense until the Haredim become 99% of the country.
Okay, so that's where reality has to change, and you know what? It's changing.
It is,
It
because
is.
they're so brilliant,
It is.
because we're brilliant people to start off with, and they
But-
can do so many things, and now they're getting them to do computers and doing all this stuff. That
Yeah,
is
but
amazing.
I don't want to take I'm saying we could always argue about the fine points, but I think from the historical perspective, we see how Israel, over the past 100 years, where it was just an idea, let's create a secular, totally just Jewish, it has evolved into being a dynamic bastion of Jewish vibrancy.
Have you
Like you
ever
said
read-
the first time we showed up, it's the hard part of making a nation. You gotta have
Yeah.
laws, you gotta have
Exactly.
jobs, you gotta fight off all
Did
these
you ever
people
read
around
Startup
you. It's
Nation?
tough.
Yeah, and not
That
lose your
book,
identity
because-
as being a distinct nation.
Get the book Startup Nation.
Okay,
It's
so we'll
in
stop
the-
here, and I will
So
have
you're
to
gonna
do a
come
part
back,
2.
aren't you? At least. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Maybe 3.
Maybe we'll see.
Might.